Hi, I'm Jamie, I'm the CTO at Flaunt Digital, and today we're just doing a short video on the 3 top tips to perform cost optimizations on your Amazon Web Services account. So we're going to get straight in with the first one, and it's the most blindingly obvious tip for saving money on Amazon Web Services, and that's to make liberal usage of reserved instances. Now this has been an option in AWS for years now. It's been there for probably over 5 years. But it's always evolving and it's changing a lot. Just recently they introduced convertible reserved instances, and this makes an already complicated system and a complicated interface even more complicated, because reserved instances are quite daunting as a concept, because essentially what you're doing is you're paying up front for resource usage, and you can do this over 1 year or 3 years. You can also do nothing up front, partially up front, or all of it up front. So if you were to go for quite a beefy server and you're going to do all of it up front for 3 years, you're going to be paying a lot of money up front. So you've got to have a lot of trust that you're going to need that resource up in the years to come. So it's quite hard to forecast that way forward, depending on how your business works. But generally you're always better off using reserved instances. If you've been running any sort of server in Amazon, whether it's EC2 or RDS, there are 2 services that use reserved instances, you should pretty much be looking straight into getting a reserved instance on your account, because it can save you over 50%, so it's almost, you can get half price stuff basically. So it's a no-brainer. It's a really broad topic. One of a couple of things I just wanted to cover off is just how daunting it is. So just going back to what I said a minute ago, the interface is awful. And in my opinion, it should probably tell you about reserved instances when you are just starting an instance, whether that's an EC2 or RDS, because you've got a sort of an instance picker built into the reserved instance interface, and it's not the same as the picker structure that you get when you're just launching an instance. And there's more parameters in there, and now you've got convertible instances too. There's even more things to consider, and it's not immediately obvious what's going on. So I do encourage everyone to take the plunge with this and just try it out and spend a little bit of money and just make sure it's working as you think. Check your billing options as well, check your billing console and make sure that you're getting the price that you think you're getting, and try and reverse engineer the calculations. But it is worth learning, it is worth taking the plunge, because you'll save a lot of money. Okay, our next point for cost saving in AWS is to do with auto scaling setups in EC2. So we all know how auto scaling works, so hopefully you do. There's tons of ways you can scale up and down. But one of the metrics that's quite apparent in the interface is CPU. And now if you're running a website, CPU is not really a bottleneck usually, depending on what you're doing in the background. It's usually something more in line with RAM usage, or could be a number of other things, but regardless of that, it's really good to have your bottom line, or your minimum desired capacity on your auto-scaling web server fleet to be more than 1. So depending on how business critical the servers are, it might be 2 or 3 or 4. But in our experience, we have quite a lot with 2 as a minimum. And then essentially if you get anything strange that happens, or one of the servers just locks up or crashes or whatever, you're always going to have that 1 server remaining. So it's good to have 2 as a bottom line. Now the way that you can optimize this for cost is, if you're running a site that's primarily serving UK users, you're obviously going to have downtime during the night and sometimes on the weekends too, depending if it's a B2B website or B2C. So typically we'll see a drop off. It can sometimes be up to sort of 80% of regular hour-on-hour traffic through the nighttime period. So I mean, key hours, as you can imagine, when everyone's asleep in the UK, so you're talking like between 2 and 5 AM in the morning, Monday to Friday. So what you can do is you can scale your baseline back down from 2 to 1. So obviously it's a little bit of a risky strategy, because if something did go catastrophically wrong in those hours, you're not going to have a failover server or a server to pick up the traffic if one of them dies. So it's a risk that obviously you have to work out for yourself, and it depends on your business case. But we find it's really useful to scale down servers regardless of your auto-scaling policy, just based on the time. And the way you do this in EC2 is in the auto-scaling interface. You've got a tab there called Scheduled Actions. And it's essentially like a cron job setup. So if you've ever used Linux, you'll be familiar with cron jobs. It's a way to schedule anything to run on the operating system. And essentially you stub that out in the Scheduled Actions interface, very much like you sub out a cron job. So you can give it an hour or a weekday or a day of the month or whatever. But in our example we're using here, it's a day of the night. That's an hour of the night, sorry. So we'll have it scaling down a little bit at say 2 o'clock in the morning and back up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And this is only, so you're only reducing it by one server for a few hours per day, but over the course of a year, if you're running quite resource-intensive servers, it's going to add up to quite a bit of money. So it's something worth looking into. It's a quick win, really, providing your business case allows for something like that. It's obviously a risk-reward way up that you've got to do, but it can be effective to save money. So my last point for today is also going to hook into reserved instances. As I mentioned at the start, reserved instances are an absolutely huge topic in AWS for saving money, so it's likely that when you're covering these points you're going to get a bit of crossover. So the last point is the new reserved instance usage reporting you can get out of Amazon Web Services. This is quite recently launched. It's in the Cost Explorer section of your account. So if you go into your account and billing options, and then on the left-hand side you got Cost Explorer, I believe it's called. And from there you can launch this interface. And again, it's not great user interface. It's quite hard to navigate. And you'll find these recommendations under the hamburger menu if you're on desktop on the left-hand side, which is a weird concept, hamburger menus on desktop site, hiding menu options that you can't see. A bit weird, but once you know they're there, great. So you've got one for EC2, one for RDS. And what they'll both show you is they'll show you essentially tips on how to optimize your account as a whole, based on your current usage. So you can look at, I think it's 7 days or 3 months or 6 months previous, and then Amazon will give you exact recommendations on what you should go and purchase and how much that will save you in a year. So historically that calculation has been really hard to do, especially if you go back to my earlier point about how convoluted the reserved instance interface is. And once you've got quite a complex account, like we have at Flaunt Digital, what you'll find is it's really useful to set up an organization structure whereby you've got a master account or a parent account, and you buy all your reserved instances at that level, and then you can apply those discounts to any accounts underneath. So as soon as it starts getting messy like that, and they're all expiring at different times, they're all different sizes, it becomes a bit of a nightmare to manage, and that calculation that you used to have to do on paper or in Excel or whatever is now sort of done for you. Obviously you've got to take it with a pinch of salt in terms of Amazon's recommendations, because they don't know your business case and they don't know how stable your resource usage is going to be. Obviously if you're going to get rid of loads of it in 6 months, then you don't want to be paying for a year's worth. But so you've got to take a bit of context, use your own initiative a little bit, but in general it's an absolute lifesaver, and it's really specific, which is great when you come into the interface to actually make the purchases, because there's loads of options and it's quite daunting when you first go into it, because you have to decide on a lot more things than you think you have to decide upon. So that interface is great, and that's brand new. That's in the last few months that's come about. And like I said, it's not very easy to find. So if you didn't recognise the email that advertised that new offering, then like I say, go into Cost Explorer, go in the hamburger on the top left, and then it's at the bottom. There's 2 little menu items, EC2 and RDS, and it'll give you the recommendations there. And it's really accurate. And in our experience, it's really, really useful. So if you go back into your main Cost Explorer interface, you've got coverage and utilization reports. And they've been there a while, but they're, again, a little bit hard to comprehend as a newbie. So these other recommendations, basically if you follow them and your resource usage is only going to go up rather than down, then it's pretty much what you need to be doing. So it's almost a no-brainer, and it just takes a lot of the complication out of it. And so it's a great new service that Amazon have added to their interface. That's it. Hopefully you found that useful. There's loads of stuff you can do to optimize costs in your AWS account, as I mentioned at the start, and a lot of them are to do with reserved instances. So if you're going to take anything from this video, just start poking around the reserved instances areas of EC2 and RDS, and just make sure you've got some provisions in there if you're going to have long-term commitments using Amazon Web Services, because you don't want to be paying on demand by the hour or by the second or minute or whatever it's changed to now. You want to be paying up front, whether that's just partially or nothing or all of it. If you can afford all of it, then good on you, go for it, but I would get your feet wet, spending a little bit less money first to just get your confidence in it and make sure that you're using it as you think it's used, because like I say, the interface is not great. But essentially, reserved instances, they're the way to go, save money on Amazon. Hope you found that useful. See you next time.